I packed my lunch every morning for 23 years, said good morning to people who never said it back, bought the stock every single payday in silence, and then one Tuesday, a 34-year-old man in a $4,000 suit walked in and taught me why patience is the most dangerous thing a quiet woman can own. I want to be clear about something before I tell you this story. I am not a vengeful person. I am not someone who plots or schemes or sits in a dark room dreaming about the moment someone gets what they deserve. I'm a 51-year-old woman who packed her lunch every single morning for 2 decades, drove the same Honda Civic for 11 years, and said good morning to every single person in that building whether they said it back or not. I'm the woman who stayed late without being asked, who trained people who later became my supervisors, who smiled through every restructure and reorg and exciting new direction announcement that came down from the 14th floor. And for 23 years, quietly, invisibly, without telling a single soul, I bought the stock. Every paycheck. Without fail. Not a lot at once. Never enough to draw attention. Just a steady, patient, invisible accumulation that I started the year I turned 28, the year my mother told me that the only money you can really trust is money that works while you sleep. I did not tell my coworkers. I did not tell my ex-husband. I did not even tell my sister, who tells everyone everything and would have absolutely ruined it. I just bought the stock, reinvested the dividends, watched the splits, and went back to my desk on Monday morning like nothing had happened. Then Brandon Kellner walked through the front door and blew up the only world I had known for nearly a quarter century. Let me give you the context, because you needed to understand what happened and why it hit the way it did. Kellner & Associates was founded in 1987 by David Kellner, who was one of those rare people who was simultaneously a genius and a genuinely decent human being. He built the company from a 2-person consulting firm and a rented office above a dry cleaner into a mid-sized financial services company with about 400 employees across 3 floors of a glass building downtown. I joined in 2001 as an administrative coordinator, which is a fancy way of saying I answered phones, scheduled meetings, and kept the operation from quietly collapsing every time someone more important than me dropped a ball. David Kellner knew my name. That sounds like a small thing, but in a company of 400 people, it was not small. He knew my name, he knew I took my coffee black, and every December he would stop by my desk and say, "Margaret, what would we do without you?" And I would say, "Let's not find out," and he would laugh and mean it. I was not delusional about what I was. I was not his closest confidant or his most valuable employee. But I was someone. I was real. I mattered in the particular way that reliable, invisible people matter to the functioning of institutions. I watched that company grow. I watched people come and go. I watched executives rise and flame out, watched entire departments get created and then eliminated, watched the logo change 3 times and the mission statement change 5 times and the parking situation deteriorate in a way that still makes me angry if I think about it too long. Through all of it I stayed. And through all of it I bought the stock. When David announced his retirement 18 months ago, the whole building felt it. Not panic, exactly. More like the particular unease of a place that has been stable for so long that stability itself has become the culture. People made nervous jokes in the break room. People asked questions in all-hands meetings that were really just one question wrapped in different words: is everything going to be okay? David said his son Brandon would be taking over. That Brandon had been preparing for this for years. That the transition would be seamless. That the company's values would remain intact. I had met Brandon Kellner exactly twice in 23 years. He was 34 years old. He had an MBA from a school that costs more per year than I made in 3 years when I started. He had worked, as far as I could tell, at 2 other companies for about 18 months each before cycling back into the family business. He had very white teeth and the specific confidence of someone who has never been told no in a way that actually stuck. I did not panic. I bought more stock. His first day was a Tuesday in March. I remember it was raining, the kind of gray sideways rain that makes the whole city look like it's apologizing for something. I had been in by 7:30 as usual, made the coffee for the 3rd-floor kitchen as usual, and was at my desk going through the morning calendar when I heard the elevator open and a sound I can only describe as performance. Loud greeting energy. The kind of entrance that announces itself. I looked up. Brandon Kellner was wearing a suit that probably cost $4,000 and moving through the floor like he was already in a movie about himself. He had 2 people with him I had never seen before, both young, both carrying tablets, both nodding at everything he said. He was shaking hands and clapping shoulders and doing that thing where you say someone's name back to them immediately after they introduce themselves like you learned it in a seminar. He got to my desk at 9:17. I stood up, Because that is what I do when I greet people, and I said, "Good morning, Brandon. Welcome. I'm Margaret Chen. I've been with the company since 2001 and I manage executive scheduling and floor operations for the third floor. If you need anything at all to get settled in, I'm the person to ask." He looked at me for a moment with an expression I have spent a lot of time thinking about since. It was not malicious, exactly. It was something almost worse than malicious. It was the look of someone doing a quick unconscious calculation about whether you are worth the full version of their attention. He said, "Yeah, so we're actually going to be restructuring support staff pretty significantly. I've got Andrea," he gestured to one of the tablet people handling my scheduling and communications going forward. "But we'll find somewhere to plug you in." He said it the way you'd say it about a lamp you're not sure you want but haven't decided to throw away yet. Then he turned to the floor, which was filling up now, people filtering in, most of them watching this interaction with the particular frozen attention of people who understand that what they are witnessing matters, and he said, louder, "Actually, let's just address this now since everyone's here. We're going to be flattening the support structure significantly. A lot of the coordinator and administrative roles are going to be absorbed or eliminated. More of you will report directly to department heads. It's going to be more efficient and more dynamic." He smiled. "Change is good, people." He had been in the building for 43 minutes. I sat back down. I did not say anything. I did not cry. I did not make a face. I pulled up my computer screen and I looked at the number in my brokerage account that I had been watching for 23 years, and I thought about my mother, and I thought about compound interest, and I thought about the particular patience of people who have always understood that the game is longer than it looks. The next 6 weeks were, I will be honest, genuinely unpleasant. The restructure was real. My role was reclassified. I went from executive administrative coordinator, which came with a salary, a title, and a parking spot, to something called operational support specialist, which came with a lower pay band, a cubicle on a different floor, and a reporting structure that went through a 26-year-old department manager named Tyler who referred to everything as a learning opportunity. I was not fired. That was clearly intentional. Firing me would have cost them a severance package based on 23 years of service that someone had apparently done the math on and found unappealing. So instead they made the job smaller and less comfortable and waited, I think, to see if I would quit. I did not quit. I filed a formal grievance through HR about the public nature of the announcement, because regardless of everything else, what he did on that first morning violated 3 separate provisions in the employee handbook about restructuring notification procedures and the dignity of the process. HR acknowledged receipt of my grievance in an email written in the specific corporate tone that means nothing will happen. I also, during this period, called my financial advisor for the first time in about 8 months. Her name is Patricia and she has worked with me since 2009 and she is one of maybe 4 people on earth who knew the full picture of what I had been doing. We had a call. She walked me through the current numbers. She reminded me of a conversation we had years ago about exactly this kind of scenario and what the options would look like if it ever became relevant. After the call, I sat in my car in the parking garage, the new parking garage 2 blocks away where I had to pay daily since I'd lost my spot, and I let myself cry for about 4 minutes. Not about the money. About the Tuesday morning. About the look on his face. About 23 years of good mornings and packed lunches and staying late, and a 34-year-old man in a $4,000 suit who looked at me and saw something to be plugged in somewhere or discarded. 4 minutes. Then I dried my face and went back inside. The thing about holding a significant position in a company's stock when the company is not publicly traded in the traditional sense but operates under an employee equity structure, which is a thing David Kellner had built into the company's DNA from almost the beginning because he genuinely believed that the people who build a thing should own a piece of it, is that it is not a simple situation. It is not like owning shares on the New York Stock Exchange where you can just click sell and have the money in 3 days. There is a process. There are valuations. There are rights and procedures and structures. And critically, there are thresholds at which certain things become possible that are not possible below those thresholds. I had crossed one of those thresholds 4 years ago. I had crossed another one 14 months ago. And when the company, under Brandon Kellner's dynamic and efficient new leadership, initiated a formal recapitalization process to bring in outside investment, which was something he announced in an all-hands meeting in May with the same energy he'd brought to demoting me in front of the entire floor, that process required a shareholder vote on the restructuring of equity. I got the notification in my email on a Wednesday afternoon. It came to my personal email, not my work email, because my stock account had never been linked to my employment record in any formal way. I had set it up independently, through a separate brokerage, starting in 2001, buying shares through the employee equity program that David Kellner had established and that most employees treated as a footnote in their onboarding paperwork. I read the notification. I forwarded it to Patricia. I went back to work. I need to pause here and tell you something true about myself that is relevant. I am not a dramatic person. I have never wanted to be the protagonist of a story. I did not spend 23 years quietly buying stock as some kind of long con or elaborate plan for revenge or power. I did it because my mother said the money you can trust is money that works while you sleep, and because I believed in the company, and because I lived below my means and had nowhere better to put the difference, and because compounding returns over long periods of time are one of the few reliable mathematical facts in a deeply unreliable world. I did not know Brandon Kellner was going to walk through that door and publicly diminish me in front of 400 people. I could not have planned for that. I just knew, the way you know certain quiet things about yourself after enough years of paying attention, that patience is underrated and that people who believe they are the most important person in a room are frequently wrong about the size of the room. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for the last Thursday in June. I took a personal day. I wore the blue dress I bought for my daughter's college graduation. I drove to the building, found paid parking 2 blocks away, and walked in through the front door. The look on the face of Andrea, Brandon's tablet person, when I signed in at the registration table for the shareholder meeting and she saw my name and cross-referenced it against whatever document she was holding, is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. It was not a dramatic look. It was a very quiet, very fast recalibration. The look of someone whose mental model of a situation has just been revised in a way they were not prepared for. She said, "Ms. Chen." "Of course. Right this way." The room was a conference space on the 14th floor I had booked hundreds of meetings in over the years but had never sat in as a participant. There were maybe 40 people there. Lawyers, outside investors doing due diligence, a few board members, and a cluster of senior leadership including Brandon, who was at the front of the room talking to someone and did not see me come in. I found a seat. I took out the folder Patricia had helped me prepare. I set it on the table in front of me. Brandon opened the meeting. He talked about the recapitalization plan. He talked about outside investment and modernization and the exciting next chapter. He talked for about 20 minutes and he was good at it, I will give him that. He had real charisma. He could make a room believe he was inevitable. Then they got to the voting portion. And the lawyer running the process read off the shareholder register. And when they got to my name and read out my position, there was a silence in that room that I felt in my chest. Not a long silence. Maybe 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds I watched Brandon Kellner's face do something it probably had not done very often in his 34 years of very white teeth and seamless transitions. It went blank. He looked at me. I looked back. I said, "Good morning, Brandon," and I opened my folder. I'm not going to tell you that what followed was some kind of movie moment where I destroyed him with a speech and everyone stood up and clapped. That is not what happened, and I am not interested in that version of this story. What happened was procedural, and thorough, and took most of the day. The recapitalization plan required shareholder approval above a certain threshold. My position was significant enough that my vote was not decorative. My lawyer, a woman named Sandra who I had spoken with twice in the previous 2 months and who I will recommend to anyone who needs someone absolutely unflappable, walked through our position clearly and without drama. I did not try to blow up the deal. I want to be honest about that. I am not a saboteur. The company employing 400 people whose lunches I had seen in the third-floor refrigerator for 23 years was not something I was interested in destroying because a 34-year-old had embarrassed me on a Tuesday morning. What I wanted was specific. Sandra had outlined it clearly in correspondence that had been sent to the board 2 weeks prior, correspondence that apparently had been handled by legal and not shared with Brandon, which was an oversight that I suspect generated some uncomfortable conversations after that Thursday. I wanted my original role reinstated, with the title and compensation adjusted for 23 years of service and the current market rate for someone with my documented responsibilities. I wanted a formal written acknowledgement from company leadership regarding the manner of the March announcement. And I wanted 2 things I had been owed for years and had never pushed for because I am not a pusher: a formal equity review of my accumulated position, and a board observer seat that I was technically entitled to above a certain ownership threshold, which I had crossed 14 months ago and never claimed. That was it. That was the whole list. Sandra presented it. Brandon's lawyers asked for a recess. We had lunch brought in. I ate a sandwich and drank water and looked out the window at the city and thought about nothing in particular. When they came back, 2 hours later, Brandon came over to speak with me directly. This was, I was told later by Sandra, not what his lawyers had advised. He did it anyway, which tells you something about him, and I am still not sure if it tells you something good or something bad. He sat down across from me. He looked like a man recalculating. He said, "I want you to know I didn't realize." I said, "I know you didn't." He said, "What happened in March, the way that went, that wasn't personal." I said, I know it wasn't. That's actually the part that bothered me most. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You've been here 23 years. I said, Yes. He said, Why didn't you ever say anything? About the position, about what you had? And I told him the truth, which is that I never needed to. That I was not there to leverage anything or position myself or play a game. That I came in every morning and did my job and trusted that the work would matter and the investment would compound and the world would keep turning. That I did not think in terms of ammunition. I thought in terms of mornings and paychecks and the very long game. He sat with that for a while. Then he said, My father knew, didn't he? It was not really a question. I said, Your father built an equity program because he believed that the people who show up every day should own a piece of what they're showing up for. I believed him. So I showed up. Brandon Kellner looked at me with something in his face that I had not seen there before. Not the recalculation look. Something quieter. Something that might, if it had more years on it, become wisdom. He said, Okay, Margaret. Let's talk about what this looks like. I said, Let's. The agreement was finalized in August. I am not going to share the specific terms because some of them are confidential and also because the specific numbers are not really the point. The point is that I went back to the third floor. I have a title now that reflects what I actually do, which is more than I can say for most of the titles in that building. I have the observer seat. I have Tuesdays free because I restructured my schedule, and I decided that I had given enough Tuesday mornings to other people, and I would like at least one back. Andrea still works for Brandon and she is actually quite good at her job and we have a cordial relationship. Tyler, my former 26-year-old manager, was moved to a different department during a later restructure, a real one this time, and I made a point not to feel anything about that. David Kellner called me in September. He said he had heard about the meeting. He said he was sorry it had come to that. I told him it had all worked out fine and that I did not hold anything against his son, which is more or less true on my better days. He laughed and said, Margaret, what would we do without you? I said, Let's not find out. I'm telling you this story not because I want credit for being patient or strategic or smart, although I was all three, but because of a specific thing I want you to hear. The room is almost always bigger than the person who thinks they are the most important thing in it. I was in that building for 23 years. I made the coffee and scheduled the meetings and said good morning to people who did not say it back. I was invisible in the way that essential things are often invisible, the way load-bearing walls are invisible, the way the people who keep institutions functioning are invisible. And someone walked in on a Tuesday morning and looked at me and saw something to be plugged in somewhere or discarded, and made that determination in front of 400 witnesses, and it did not occur to him to wonder what was underneath. What had been accumulating? What patience looks like when it has had 23 years to work. The money was never the whole point. The point was the Tuesday morning and what it meant about how people see other people, or fail to. The money was just what happened when someone spent 23 years believing that showing up matters and that the long game is real. My mother was right. The only money you can really trust is money that works while you sleep. But I would add this, the only position you can really trust is one you built so quietly that no one thought to take it from you, because no one knew it was there. I packed my lunch this morning. I drove the same route I have driven for 23 years. I said good morning to every person in that building. And when the elevator opened on the 14th floor, I walked out first.